Hi, welcome to another Coffee HEMA episode with me, Jamie McKeever. Today I'm going to work through one of the requests that I've been sent through a submission form that's been up for ages and most of you never use or know about probably. And before I get into that, I want to talk a bit about sort of how that process is changing and how I'm hoping to fund some of the work that I do through this and other aspects in future. If you follow me on everything, you'll know that I recently started a Patreon for safety research. And I have just now gotten my Coffee page, Kofi page, up and running to look at all other aspects of the work that I do, both in terms of these Coffee HEMA episodes and some of my work on translation, some of my work on interpretation and kind of and pedagogy and that kind of stuff. So if you are interested in seeing that, please go to the link below. And from now on, I will be taking submission requests through Coffee. If you want to buy me a coffee through there, you can request that I cover a particular topic. I'll be much faster about those because that will notify me the current form is kind of hidden away and I only remember to look at it periodically. So please head over to my Ko-Fi page or Coffee page. I know how to pronounce it. There's also a copy of my translation there available, translation of Filippo Vardi, and other resources will be coming there depending on when you're watching, may already be there. So the question I was asked in the old process, in the old form, was from a guy called Luke Webb. Don't know where he's from, off the top of my head. And he asked me basically, if I had a time machine and could go back in time to the start of my HEMA journey, what fundamentals would I train? It's a good question. Kind of fits within a lot of the stuff that I've talked about from sword aspects. And unsurprisingly, it fits to what I teach beginners these days because I don't need a time machine to teach beginners. I do it in reality. So before I get into what, I want to talk about how I teach fundamentals and how I would want to learn them. Because I think a lot of teaching of fundamentals tries to isolate them. You see this most clearly, I think, with footwork exercises. Your footwork exercises where you are doing a passing step or a gathering step, and your instructor is kind of telling you to do this without context. Just do this step, do that step. Not even a sword in hand. I see this quite often as a way of kind of teaching fundamentals, teaching footwork, and I don't think it teaches anything. So when you're looking at fundamentals, it needs to be in the round. It needs to be something which is real, is realistic, and is practiced together. So you cannot look at footwork in isolation of sword work. You cannot look at these things, not going together. So the first thing I would do is for that time machine is go back in time and train them well, rather than necessarily training any specific topic. Looking at them in context and looking at them in some kind of play aspect or free form, but just everything together at once. Not everything, but sword and footwork and all that kind of stuff. So what areas would I focus on? Well, obviously the first thing I would focus on is defense, the parry of some kind, or void or something like that. Because I think everything flows from that. I think we focus, a lot of my early classes, we kind of came to a crossing and did a thing from a crossing. We didn't really think about why we were at that crossing. We didn't really think about what was going on with it, or whether the play that we were doing was the right play to do from the crossing we were in. This is the one that we were doing. So the first thing I would look at, as I say, is defense with footwork, right? Not doing a passing step every time, not doing the same footwork every time, but thinking about, okay, I've put my sword in the way and I've stepped this way. How does that different? So pairing footwork with that in offline and online directions from a defense perspective. And then the main thing I would look at is, well, what to do after a defense from both angles, right? And again, I think a lot of early things that I did when I started out, we didn't really be clear about who has defended here. It was just like, hey, we're at a crossing and this person is now acting, right? And I'd want to spend a lot more time on that decision-making process of saying, okay, a crossing has happened, a defense has happened. What do I do next? Whether that is me as the attacker, I've been defended, or whether me as the defender who's defended, right? A lot of my drills start with a parry, an attacker, a parry, and a riposte as the opening for it, because I think that is the cornerstone of pretty much everything else interesting that we do. Again, I'd pair that with footwork, right? Because the footwork for the defense, the footwork for the attack, and the footwork for the riposte, all of these can be different. and focusing on these different aspects is quite important, and changes what happens next. But at a fundamentals perspective, they need to all be options rather than always being static or always doing the same kind of thing. And more close attention to, okay, the thing that I wanted to do didn't work. What do I do next? As this kind of follow up from the other person's defense. But then also, from a defender's perspective, and then the riposte, getting used to realizing that the defense is not all. You've got to be coming back into it. Right? These are kind of core aspects that need to be through. The last thing within all of that, right? So it's pretty generic, but we're talking about fundamentals, right? So defense and attack, pretty minimal. Pairing that with footwork, as I said, and particularly on the footwork thing, understanding better about when offline versus online makes sense. I see people to kind of go to extremes here quite often, to basically be like, oh, you should always be moving offline, or no, you should never be moving offline, or just never practicing offline footwork in any way. And closer attention to how stepping offline changes what happens next in interesting ways as part of those fundamentals. Again, would be something that I would really want to focus on earlier on, because it just kind of doesn't, unless you've ingrained the idea of sometimes you step offline, you will end up going directly towards your opponent a lot of the time, and that will mean you have big gaps in your fencing. So that's what I would focus on, and is, to be fair, what I do focus on. Unfortunately, the constraints of space mean I don't do the offline stuff as much as I would like as part of training. We don't normally have as much room to move offline as I would like in the hole that we have. But absolutely that basic structure around, okay, an attack has happened, a defense has happened, what now, right? We're not over. We need to think about what happens next. But keeping that as the core fundamental that, unlocks everything else interesting. Never basically getting to the point where you're saying, okay, we're at a crossing, just do a thing. Always, why are we at a crossing? Well, because someone's defended, and getting it ingrained that is the start for everything. And that all other interesting things flow from that one fundamental, whether that is you following up from the defense as an attacker or you following up from your defense as the defender. That first component, attack and defense, the parry, and where do you go from there is what I would be focusing on with corresponding interesting and varied footwork. If you'd like to request that I talk about a particular topic, or would just like to support this and similar videos in future, please head on to my Coffee page, buy me a coffee, request a topic, or head over to my Patreon page to support safety research for HEMA.